So guys, Siegfried here. Welcome to another presentation. And like I always said, I think we're going to have an interesting discussion today. So I'd like to start with my blog always. And this is the most recent article, Selling More Dynamic Range and Noise. And last week we had a look at the article, the two-stop Micro Four Thirds advantage, and some additional information in the previous video. Today I like to talk about Olympus. I want to focus a little bit more on Olympus cameras. We're going to have a quick look at what to consider when buying an Olympus or when thinking of getting into Olympus. So I'm focusing on Olympus and not so much OM system, because it started with Olympus, and I like us to focus on Olympus. Doesn't mean anything wrong with OM systems or that I'm not happy with OM systems, but it's sometimes good to take a step back and just look where everything happened, how it happened. And then we're going to look at what camera and lens combination would be best for you. I like to give you some feedback on the discussion we had last week on dynamic range and noise. And I also want to give you a big thank you and some feedback on the performance of the blog. So let's go directly into the big thank you. So the blog has been doing especially well over the last 2 months, and in July it's been wild. I'm totally surprised by the views, or the high number of views, and the interest in my articles and the discussion on the blog. So what you have here on the left, you have the current top 10 articles, and you can see there's a good mix here. Most surprising for me was I did an article a while back on color profiles using the the Olympus art filters, and it's going wild. It's amazing the sudden interest in this specific article. For months, for the past 3 years, the EP7 has always been in the top position here, and by far, so there's nothing close to the EP7 popularity and the interest in learning more about it. Another interesting one is this ETTR article right on the top here, and then further down you see a very interesting mix on subjects. Obviously the OM3, people like to know more about the OM3. I did a 6-part series on creative color photography with Olympus, and this particular one is very popular. Then obviously there's a huge interest in workspace and the enhanced RAW format. Another one on the OM3, and then I think my blog is well known for the discussion on the PenF and color profiles and monochrome profiles. Another more technical article, the histogram and digital imaging process. There's a tremendous interest for more information on digital photography or digital cameras. Sometimes one thinks, yeah, it's maybe too much information that I'm providing. But if you look at the interest, it is, people are really interested to get to know more about digital photography. And I personally think Olympus is one of the most exciting cameras to learn more about the digital imaging process. I'm not saying it's the best, but it's very exciting to learn more. And what makes it so exciting is whatever you learn in terms of the digital imaging process with Olympus applies to all other cameras. Functionalities might differ from brand to brand, but the basic concepts are very similar, if not exactly the same. So quite a benefit that we have by learning more with our Olympus cameras. And then obviously the gradation function of Olympus is hugely popular. People read this article, unbelievable. Hand in hand with this article is the article on the color creator. Then I have a separate pages section on the blog, and this particular article for color profiles is very popular. And then I want to show you something interesting. So the top referrals month by month and week by week or year by year is represented in this format here. And if you look at all the search engine referrals, photography forums, Facebook groups, there's so many different groups and communities. They represent 7% of all the referrals, this part here. And the way Blogger does it is you get, obviously the top referrer, and then going down to the lesser one at the bottom. And the lesser one is normally two referrals or maximum 3, which means that this gray area here is mostly individual referrals. So if this was 10,000 or 1,000 people here, then you would have 7% of that would be groups or search engines, and the rest is individuals doing referrals to the blog. Now, for me, this is very interesting because it simply means that the MFT community must be huge if one by one people refer articles or tell somebody to go and read an article on the blog. So there must be a huge community of Micro Four Thirds photographers out there which are quietly doing their thing. They're doing photography, they're enjoying the camera, they're not really on photography blogs or communities, but they're out there doing their thing, which I think is really interesting. I also have more than 70 countries throughout the year visiting the blogs. So people from more than 70 countries are visiting the blog. So I want to say, just say a huge big thank you for all these individual referrals and the exciting interest in the articles I wrote and seemingly at the moment the videos we are doing. So I want to go to the next discussion, and that would be let's have a look at Olympus cameras and why buy Olympus cameras. Now I've done a few articles, you can go and read them. I think it's difficult to define Olympus. No, it's not difficult, but why would people buy Olympus today? The brand was sold in 2021. The cameras are really old now. If you look at the bottom here, the EM10 here, for example, the EM10 II, it's an old camera. The EM5 II is an old camera, but people still buy them today. I think the answer lies in the first point here. It's an all-inclusive photography concept or solution. So Olympus really worked on all the different areas which is important for good results. That means I need a very good camera, I need an excellent sensor, I need a advanced image processing technology, lenses are important, peripherals or options like flash units, and everything that forms a photography solution to be able to enjoy your photography or do excellent photos. Olympus looked at all the different aspects that makes for a very good or a top level photography solution. That's one of the reasons I would say why Olympus. Another one is, like I just said, Olympus is perfect for learning more about digital photography. So because they had a step-by-step process in developing the cameras and developing their technologies and developing their offer, it becomes easy to learn more about digital photography and really become good theoretically and practically. Then obviously Olympus, the combination of the camera, the lens, workspace, the TruePix image processor, absolutely brilliant. My advice would be, if you get involved with Olympus, if you're interested with Olympus, your goal should be to discover Olympus cameras, discover the different features, discover basics like picture modes, go on a discovery with Olympus cameras, also on a discovery to discover or learn more about digital photography. And then I know this might be a little controversial, but the most accurate RAW converter for your Olympus camera is Workspace. Now there are minor frustrations, and I think every software has a bit of minor frustrations, but the more you learn and the more you get used to Workspace, the more difficult it gets to use anything else. In fact, I'm at the point where I exclusively use Workspace for my RAW conversions, and I would then edit either a JPEG or a 16-bit TIFF file in my case with Affinity. And then I think the most important aspect of Olympus cameras is Olympus never differentiated their products on image quality. So if you buy a EM10 today, or a OM3 or OM12, the basic image quality is very close. Obviously, if you buy the first EM10 or the first EM5, then the OM1 would have better image quality, or the OM3. The reason is not intentionally, and this is important. It's more a case of, as Olympus advanced in their technologies and as they produced better TruePix image processors, they added more technologies to improve the image quality. But the very interesting part is the basic so-called Kodak baseline image is present in all Olympus cameras, digital cameras, and then there are variations or specific technologies. One good example is the eye-enhanced picture mode, which adds specific technologies to improve pointers or some specifics about image quality. So it's really important to realize that image quality was never used as a differentiator, even with lenses. So if you buy a very expensive Pro lens, or so-called standard or premium Zuiko lens, then the image quality between these lenses you would find are very similar. It's really the application that makes the difference. So having a 40-150 f2 lens gives you some application advantages or benefits versus the much cheaper 40-150 f4 to 5.6, you know. So focus on the application, not so much this one will give me better image quality. If you use your lens correctly, you will be totally surprised by how good it is. So the next one I want to have a quick look at is how to consider and evaluate cameras. So what to look for if you want to buy a camera, an Olympus camera. And I think you need to start with defining your needs. Knowing that all Olympus cameras and lenses are really good, so you don't have to worry that you're going to buy a bad one or an inferior one or inferior image quality. That's not the case. For example, if you're a pro photographer and you're a wildlife photographer, for example, you're always in nature and in extreme conditions, I wouldn't buy a EM10 Mark II. I would go for something like the EM1 or OM1, for example. If you're a creative photographer, I would rather look at something like the Pen F or the EP7 or today the OM3. So that's what I mean by define your needs, understand what you want from your camera. And I confirm that with this line here. So Olympus cameras were designed for specific customer needs. And we're looking at application requirements like speed, weather sealing, and repetitive results. So a top professional level camera like the OM1 Mark II, there you have enough functionality and excellence, if I may, for the photographer to repetitively take great images in specific or various conditions. Like I said, the Kodak look is the baseline, and the TruePic processor added image quality improvements. And then there's a very interesting concept, and I think it links to the discussion in the previous video we did, you know, selling more dynamic range and less noise. The more we learn how the camera operates or how the camera works, what's happening inside the camera, then you will start realizing that computational photography or that computational features support more photo opportunities. In other words, it fills weaknesses which is part of the digital technology today. Not so much Olympus, Sony or Canon. It takes general weaknesses and it gives an answer, it gives an option to solve or to still excel in difficult conditions. And then obviously the creative community, you know, I think Olympus monochrome, the monochrome profile function is probably one of the best out there in the market. It's absolutely amazing. Color profiles, and I think the Olympus color profiles are very unique, different. The fact that we can target specific colors is so nice. And then art filters, you know, we saw with that article that the creative person can really do magic with art filters, and we shouldn't just look at the art filter as an art filter. There's so much we can do with it. And then obviously the color creator is another absolutely amazing function. The more you use it, the more you get used to the color creator. It's just absolutely amazing. So I want to step back and have a quick look at last week. I just want to do an overview of a few things here. And I think the main message is, look at the design. There's no coincidence that all cameras have a noise floor. So the fact that you buy a expensive full frame camera and then discover that there's noise is based on the fact that all sensors have a noise floor. All sensors have a so-called signal to noise ratio, depending on where your exposure on the linear line is here. All sensors have a saturation capacity, a maximum saturation level, which is linked to the native ISO. The dynamic range of the sensor is a designed aspect. It's not by accident that the one, you know, the bigger one has more dynamic range than the other one. There are very clever people designing the characteristics of these sensors. Now it's the choice of the manufacturer, the camera manufacturer, whether he's going to put a very specialized, expensive sensor in the camera, or is the purpose of a specific camera model, you know, general application, volume, things like that, and therefore you might find a less sophisticated sensor in that camera. So there is a difference between what sensor camera manufacturers use in what camera model. With Olympus, what I found interesting is The sensors are generally very good, excellent high quality sensors or high sensitivity sensors. The 20 megapixel in the EM1 Mark II and the EM1 Mark III or the OM5, that 20 megapixel sensor is a fantastic sensor. Even DxO Mark rated it the best micro four thirds sensor at the time, and that was also the last micro four thirds camera they tested. So fantastic sensor. The one in the OM3 or the OM1, we can talk for days about that sensor. It's an absolutely amazing sensor. You know, OM System or Olympus at the time, when they launched the original OM1, they said that they have a two-stop advantage, and it's not the two-stop advantage that I explained. They really challenged larger sensor cameras because they knew that the OM1 sensor is extraordinary. It's a fantastic sensor. It's really an amazing sensor. And when you use these cameras, so for example, when you photograph with the OM3, you don't have to do much to realize, but this is an extremely capable camera, not only in functionality or creativity, but that sensor is something absolutely special. So what I like you to see here is a design aspect. It's not by accident that one camera or differ from another camera, and it's got nothing to do with the size of the sensor. It's a design aspect. What's also interesting here on this slide here is I added 4 bracketed images for typical HDR applications. So you have the first shot a little darker, dark, and bright, and you can place each of these images onto the graph here. Now I know that there's the histogram here, which is a JPEG histogram or a gamma histogram, is different from a linear histogram here. That's okay, I understand that, but you can still get some sense of what's happening and what's the correlation here between this here and what we see here. For example, if you look at this one here, it's really here in the shadow area here. So the data is all in the shadow area here. That tells me I could have been on the saturation level, because remember, this is the operating range of the sensor. It always stays like this. My exposure just drops to this area here. I could still be at full saturation here and a full SNR at this level, but I'm getting very close to the noise floor, which means I will see noise in the shadows here. And if I move very close to this point here, I need a very expensive special sensor to produce top results in this area here. And this area here, the performance of this area here, I think also today differentiate top sensors from more budget or affordable sensors, is this area here. So my question is, would you expose like this when you take a ETTR, or not a ETTR, a HDR sequence? I think when you select bracketing, the first option is 2 EV changes, so 2 stops. So I take this image, then down 2 stops, down 2 stops, 4 ups, up 4 stops here, or 6 stops. I'm not sure what the ratio is here. Shouldn't one select the half stop option? Would it be even interesting to select a bracketing sequence with a 3rd stop change from image to image? So you can sort of look at this scenario here and ask yourself if it really makes sense to overshoot here, to clip the highlights like here in this case here, or should one sort of stay within this range and just move the histogram right and left, but stay within the limits here when you do bracketing for HDR images. Think about that. Next week or next, in one of my next videos, we're going to take a closer look at that. So another concept I want to explain or just go through, and that is we exposing the sensor concept. So the scene through the lens, the aperture shutter, and onto the sense. So the third, or what I call the fourth exposure variable, the average scene luminance, we can change that. The aperture shutter. So three variables are determining how much light we passing on to the sensor here. So on the one hand, we have the full frame sales line promising capturing more light. So they say full frame cameras capture more light. The alternative to that is using your exposure formula and your exposure mix to control or capture more light on the sensor. I prefer this option because I can control that. So it's a subtle difference, but a very important difference. There was one comment on the video where the person was talking about ETTR, exposing to the right, and most people think ETTR is the way to saturate the sensor a little more, in other words, to up the performance or the efficiency of the sensor, but that's not always true. So ETTR is not the only method of having more light on the sensor. Another method is the simple exposure mix, and by exposure mix I'm talking about the three variables controlling the light here and the ISO setting, which is the fourth variable, exposure variable. So here you have the aperture, or let's start like this. So here you have the full exposure mix. You can call it the pixel, you can call it the well, the well capacity or whatever. At the top here, this is the exposure that we like to get to, the 18% gray exposure level, for example. This here are the three exposure variables controlling the light to the sensor. And at the bottom I have the noise floor. Now look at this interesting illustration here. If I drop the exposure to the sensor, the closer I get to the noise floor, the more visible the noise floor is at this level here. So the closer I move, smaller S and R signal to noise ratio. Now I have to amplify this image signal here. I have to amplify it with the ISO to get to the gray level, the 18% gray level exposure. So I'm taking this noise, the image signal information and noise, visible noise, and I just keep on amplifying that until I get to that level there. By changing my exposure mix, I can now determine what ratio this will be. So will I purposely select more light onto the sensor so that I can work with a smaller ISO amplification, more image sensor information, the image signal, and a less visible noise floor? So I can change my exposure mix, and I think what is important to learn here, as little as a third stop can make a significant difference in noise. So one thought that I can leave with you here is always think in terms of stops. So if I up my ISO from 200 to 400, I increase by a stop. So if I increase the ISO with one stop, I would get one stop less light on the sensor. In other words, the image signal from the sensor is one stop smaller. So start thinking of doubling light and halving light. Get used to that sort of thinking. So when you decide, yes, I need a faster shutter speed because it's a low light condition, I'm now in the city and I want to get this picture, then ask yourself why, if you don't want a tripod, why not just take a beanbag with you, and you can place the camera somewhere on a beanbag and then have much better control about your exposure mix here. You can get this up back here. And this brings the final question: is there a time limit to reaching a full saturation on the sensor? So is there a time limit involved to expose up to this saturation point? No, there's no time limit involved. So if you want to expose for 10 or 15 seconds, and you will by that you will have more light exposing the sensor and the benefits of that, then get a beanbag that you can keep with you. They are so, but all of a sudden you start thinking differently, and you will see your photography also change dramatically. I want to end with a few photos. I was using my OM5, and I did handheld bracketing shots, so without a tripod. And what I did was I took one raw file from the bracketed series of images, and I converted that in Workspace, and I then did it. So I did 3 shots for every shot, so 3 bracketed shots, and I did a HDR in Affinity Photo 2 with the 3 shots. So you see on the left, you will always see the workshop 1 raw file conversion I did versus the HDR. And in the next video we're going to talk about this, and we're going to share some ideas on again exposing the sensor and what the differences are and what we can learn from that. So yeah, thank you for joining today. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you learned something new. Thank you, Siegfried.